and one of those things for me was having a really good way of understanding what we could do to our app listing to improve it, not just to at the high level of like, okay, our installs went up by X%, but really understanding what the levers were to really improve the app listing.
And we're live. Daniel Sim, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. It's cool to get a chance to chat with you here. We were talking a little bit about writing just before we started, which I think is an interesting thing. I've actually noticed. I've been doing more writing myself, and I've noticed a number of people that I've seen online are trying to have that discipline, for this coming year. So I think it's an interesting way to spend your time, and a good discipline. How's that going for you?
I think it's going pretty well. I set the maybe slightly too ambitious target of 1,000 words a day, because it sounded
Right,
achievable. But you know what it's
right,
like. Like I don't beat myself up too much, but I think in probably 3 days out of 5, I'm getting those 1,000 words down, which is good coming
right,
from zero.
right, right. Yeah, sometimes it's like you sit there and you just like you got nothing like that feels interesting to say or whatever, and you kind of just like force yourself. But I find for myself that it's interesting how you can feel like you have absolutely nothing to say, but as you just kind of force yourself, you'll start coming up with ideas. And like sometimes you think about writing in terms of documenting the ideas you already have, but it's interesting how it can be a great way to actually generate more ideas, and you go, oh yeah, I didn't quite think of it that way before, it helps you to flesh things out.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And I think I
Yeah.
think I grappled with imposter syndrome for a long time because
Hmm.
I I took a lot of things for granted. Like I've been building Shopify apps for a hell of a long time now, and you just naturally build up knowledge in that time,
Yeah.
and you don't kind of realize how far you've came. So when I started kind of sharing
Right.
in social media a lot more last year, um, it was pretty clear that okay, that looks obvious to me, but not to other people. So that was a great catalyst for me to start writing just stuff that I wouldn't even think that people don't know. Just put that down
Right.
there, and yeah, it's just really interesting to see where it leads.
Right. Right. So what's kind of the background on your journey with Shopify apps? If you could give me kind of the rundown on that.
Yeah, wow, it's it's a long time. It's many years now, almost a decade that I've been kind of in that area, and it was kind of I guess partially by accident. So uh, I thought of the idea of starting an SEO app, search engine optimization, quite a long time ago. I was working at a large online retailer, and I could see that they struggled with understanding what it was. And in reality, in my mind, it was pretty simple stuff, and they should be doing the basics. And there was no one at the time who was kind of building tools for people who wanted to just do the basic SEO of having a good page title and headings and meta description, that kind of thing. It was all this kind of mystical black hat um, stuff that was
Right.
that was way out there.
Right.
So I got together with
Right.
an ex-colleague, and we also had a product manager from Skype join us, and we took the kind of let's build this thing and go to the moon route. As you can probably imagine, it didn't go to the moon. It was 2 years of kind of building in a cave and not really getting anywhere. So that crashed and burned. Um, but at the time Shopify was coming out, and I my bank balance was zero. It was probably minus, to be honest. Um, so I went to do some contracting in London, software engineering. But it was really annoying to me that I knew this was a real problem. Just what we built over those 2 years didn't solve it. Um, and Shopify was coming out, and I thought, could we take that one feature from this thing that we spent 2 years building that I knew people were using and interacting with, and just turn this into a product on Shopify? Because
Was
the
the
API was
retailer you
super
were
easy.
with at that time? Were they on Shopify or were they on another platform?
They weren't. I don't know how I learned about
Gotcha.
Shopify. I think it was because I was looking around for kind of platforms at the time. I thought it'd be really cool to build something on a platform. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I was aware of e-commerce, and Shopify's API was really cool because it was super easy to get going with. I loved what they were
Hmm.
doing with the App Store, and that you have a distribution channel straight out of the box. Um,
Yeah.
so that was attractive. So I launched that one feature as an app on Shopify, and I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. It was free, but it gradually snowballed. Um, Pretty long journey from then on out, but still at the end grew that into a good business that I exited last year.
Hmm. That's awesome, man. Um, so yeah, the exit I wanted to drill into. I saw a little bit of the post that you wrote on how it was a challenging process and that you worked with Sherry Walling, who does kind of like she's a therapist, right?
Clinical psychologist, yeah.
Clinical psychologist.
I
Yeah,
don't I don't know I
yeah.
don't know the difference, but I think she's got more
Right,
education or
right, right, right,
something
right,
like that.
right, right. Yeah, I thought I really appreciated that, that you shared that, and I think that I've definitely gotten some counseling in the past and found it helpful. And I think that I mean it's a difficult thing, building a business, owning a business, all these types of things. So I think probably more of us should be getting that kind of support.
You know, I I was really in two minds about writing that down. I come from Scotland, and I grew up in a family where it was kind of like don't talk about your feelings, and even more so as a man, not to. Um,
Yeah.
so it was definitely that, and it was also I think I wondered if it would be perceived by some as a weakness, like oh you needed to
Right.
get someone
Right.
to
Right.
help
Right.
you with your
Right.
mental health, like what was
Right.
wrong with you.
Yeah.
And I think I had those same kind of like misconceptions before I started working with Sherry as well. I went to see some. I think there must have been a blend of psychologists and business coaches and various other people in that space, both locally in Copenhagen and online. Um, and yeah, it was hard to find someone who wasn't too kind of like tell me how you feel, or the other end of the spectrum
Uh,
was like bring pull yourself together. What are you doing here? Like you're a man. Build this company. Like
right.
it was really hard to find someone who's going to be a good fit for me. And I think that was what was great about Sherry in the end is because she really understands so many facets of it. In that there is that psychological aspect, but there's also um, understanding what it is to be a solo founder and a bootstrapper and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So maybe even a more practical level, all that kind of stuff. So it was a
Yeah.
fantastic experience for me. And since I wrote that down, um, the amount of people who've just written to me and said that they found it helpful or they've had the same experience has been surprising
Yeah.
to me. People who I didn't even expect um,
Yeah.
have gone down that road, and I think it shouldn't be so taboo. Why
Yeah.
should we be so closed off about I'm working with this mental health professional? We would
Yeah.
certainly not think twice about saying I've got a personal trainer. Like it's the
Right.
same. It's a personal trainer for our mind, and we
Right.
as people who really work with our brain day in day out. Why shouldn't we have someone who can kind of help us navigate the harder parts of that, our emotions and our feelings
Right.
and adversity when we come against it?
Right. It's so true. It's like, um, I saw a tweet the other day, mental health is health. It's a part of your overall health. And it's like, even for me, who like, I think it's so important. And I think I think it's awesome for people to talk about it. And at the same time, there's part of me where in the back of my head I have those same doubts that you have about it, like, oh, you shouldn't talk about this kind of stuff or shouldn't get into too much detail. It's a weird. thing, but I think that it's something we should talk more about. It's something people should be more open about. It's funny because I was talking to a friend about coaching. I don't know, this was like 2 months ago, and it seemed like the like I had zero interest in the idea of getting a coach or just the whole world of coaching. And I've been seeing it everywhere now. Like I've just a lot of people who I respect and stuff are like, yeah, I work with a bunch of different types of coaches, and so I've been thinking a lot about that and thinking about finding a coach. But it's this tricky process because you're like, it's like you're trusting them with kind of like changing your behavior to some extent. So then I worry like, well, what if I get the wrong person to like screw me up, or
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. It's kind of nerve wracking, just kind of navigating that.
I think it is. I think the right one helps you navigate your own thoughts rather than comes with their own ideas of how the way it should be. Um, I think that's
Right.
key here. Is you don't want someone who's and some coaches I spoke to were kind of, it was obvious they were just going to take their blueprint that had worked for them and say that I should follow it. That's not what I
Mm.
wanted. I wanted someone to help me navigate my own journey and my own motivations and where I came from and where I wanted to be.
What are some of the takeaways that you had as far as how to have better mental health, better balance in the midst of bootstrapping a business?
Um, I think my work was a lot about figuring out what like exploring different paths that I hadn't necessarily considered before, and also um, yeah, mainly that thinking of how these different routes could go, because I was standing at a point where it was the business was going well, it was going up, um, but I still felt uneasy and I felt like something had to change, and I really had to figure out
Yeah.
what that was. Like it is
Yeah.
like again, it's kind of ridiculous because I wanted to be in the position I was in, but I got there and it was kind of like something's not right here. I don't know what it is. So it was like
I know
I can't
exactly
pick up
what
a
you mean.
book and like the book can't tell me, yeah, let's double your business and you'll be happy. So it was stuff like that. Like one of the things we talked about was like, what's the worst thing that could happen? I go and get a job
Right.
somewhere, working for an
Right.
interesting company.
Right.
How would that make me feel?
Right.
And like reconciling those things, like putting it in front of me as an option. And it
Yeah.
was it was very much kind of separating me from the business and the thing that I'd made. I
Yeah.
seen a tweet. I think it was this week about someone who said like you are the business, like invest 100% in yourself or something like that. That kind of stuff's bullshit because it leads to very negative mental patterns. You look at your analytics, you look at your MRR, and you feel shit if it's gone down by 10%. It shouldn't be like that. It should be
Yeah.
you should be able to detach this thing from you as a person and focus on what
Yeah.
what you want rather than I have to do these things to grow the business by 50% next year. And I think that was
Yeah.
part of my situation is I felt that I was pushed into the situation where I had to grow the business. Um, and maybe that isn't what I wanted. So yeah, the
Hmm.
exit was great. The exit was exactly what I needed.
That's awesome. It's funny, man. I've had similar experiences to where I built an email app for marketing app for Magento, and at the time I had a full time job, and the dream was to get this thing off the ground and then to make a living doing it, and then I get to that point and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy about it, and then before you know it, I'm like, it's just like what you're saying. It's like, oh man, I'm not happy, or I'm stressed out, or uh, it doesn't. I didn't. I thought I was gonna get to the end of the rainbow or something and find bliss, and it's like, no, there's all sorts of weirdness and stuff like that, and it's a strange thing. But yeah, I think when you go through that, you kind of you hit a bit of a wall and stuff.
And it'd been a long time as well. I mean, the 7 years. I think I look back at my career, and I'd never been anywhere for longer than 3 years. So I think it's just the time on the wall as well for me. I think
Yeah.
everything seemed to align. Like it maybe doesn't make the biggest financial sense, but it made fantastic sense for me at that point.
Yep. Yep. Well, now that we've got a little therapy session out of the way, let's it's funny because like you talked about that balance between like talking about business and talking about your feelings, and I find that I tend to like to jump in between those two worlds like quite a bit, you know. I guess it's just what I'm interested in. But so App Store Analytics is the app that you're building now, and it basically like allows Shopify app developers to get analytics to figure out how to better optimize their apps for driving growth and stuff like that. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, as an app developer of over 7 years, you come across a bunch of problems, don't you? Naturally, things that things that you need to do to grow your business.
Right.
And one of those things for me was having a really good way of understanding what we could do to our app listing to improve it. Not just to at the high level of like, okay, our installs went up by X%, but really understanding what the levers were to really improve the app listing. Because we were doing that with our product. We were launching new features, running A/B tests on those, gathering quantitative feedback within our app, but we couldn't do that kind of stuff with our app listing. So that was really the catalyst of building like internal tools
Hmm.
at Plugin Useful. So I had various scripts, I had a Google Sheet, and all this kind of stuff kind of cobbled together to understand what was going on with the app listing, and ran a bunch of experiments. And what was really interesting with that was we learned kind of a lot of stuff that I didn't expect to learn, and I was hoping for that because I mean if it was as simple as like let's put some key benefits images up there, let's put a video up there, and our traffic and installs go up. I don't know. It seems too easy. So with those tools that I'd built, we were able to understand that what works for other app developers might not work for us. So we learned, for example, if we put key benefits images on one of our app listings, that our install rate went down, which was like, why? But the data said that. So that was what we kind of used as our North Star for doing these kind of optimizations. And we did.
When you're
Uh,
when you're talking about like testing something out on one of your app listings, do you have are you talking about just multiple apps that do different things that you're playing with, or are you able to have a separate listing for one app and test out different listings?
Yeah, so the way we did it was just to have a single listing, but run it at different times. So your A would perhaps run for the first 2 weeks of the month, and your B would run for
Got it.
the final 2 months of the month, two
Got it.
weeks of the month. So it's not as scientific as like a parallel A/B test, but
Right.
surprisingly, as long as you slice it into small enough sections, like if you segment your traffic to the listing, you can come up with a very
Mm.
similar audience, and you can look at those audiences at those two different periods and make a very good, solid conclusion of what your experiment's results were.
Nice. That's cool. And are you able to like as an app developer, if you throw an app up, like how much like are you basically are you getting a good amount of traffic if you're a relatively new app and you launch the listing? How much like are you getting a decent amount of traffic, or does it just vary entirely based on how big your install base is?
So if you're starting from zero in the App Store today, it's hard. It's not a case that you're going to get organic traffic from day one, in my experience. Um, you
Mm.
might get featured in new and noteworthy if you're lucky. I mean, there are some apps in there with zero reviews. But I say to all app developers now that you're going to want to have some other way to get to your first tens of users and your first tens of reviews. Once you're there,
Hmm.
it's kind of like SEO. Like it's nice. It's compounding growth. It might be slow and steady, but it is compounding growth. So it's
Hmm.
you need something to kick it to start, without a doubt.
Right. 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 Gotcha. So you were talking about some of the different tests that you were looking at with like images and the benefits and stuff.
Yeah. What other things did we do? We experimented with the pricing copy, for example, which was quite interesting. Um,
Mm.
and also stuff around keywords as well. Like I see a lot of app listings and developers kind of write it in a very like flowery way, or they use the terms that they feel merchants will be looking for, or even
Mm.
proprietary terms to their app or their own app's name. Um, what we did was we kind of put all of our keywords into different buckets based on features, and we looked at how those buckets were performing. We could see out of that, for example, that one of our features was very, very poor in visibility of keywords. We weren't ranking for any structured data related keywords. So we
Mm.
wanted to move away from brand terms, which we were naturally ranking well for, and focus on structured data terms. So that was something that was really beneficial to us as well, was to understand that we're ranking number one for plugin SEO, for plugin speed. Let's totally remove all of those terms from the app listing, um, and focus on non-brand keywords.
Gotcha. And then that worked out pretty well.
That was really good. That was one of the most successful experiments we ran. Also due to the fact that it was a very popular feature of the app, and we weren't ranking for those keywords, so that when someone did land on our app listing after the optimization and installed it, they were more likely to keep it installed as well. So it was, yeah, it was a very nice one.
Nice, man. And so an app developer signs up, and how does it work? Like what's the experience like for them once they sign up and load up their app into your product?
Yeah, so you've got Google Analytics tracking your app listing already, hopefully. You link that Google Analytics with App Store Analytics, and it pulls in the data from there, and it
Oh, cool.
makes that clearer, I guess you could say. So, for example, on the App Store, Shopify sends a bunch of information on the query string, surface parameters they're called. What App Store Analytics does is to turn those query string parameters into separate rows so that you can analyze that. So you can look at for example, at how you're doing overall for organic search on the App Store versus collection rankings. You can look at how groups of individual keywords are performing. So a level of detail you don't get in Google Analytics. And you can also, what I released this week, which is kind of where I was always going, was the ability to look at your history of your app listing and then push analyze this, and then it gives you that result. It can say, like, you made these changes on December the 21st, and we can see that it improved your install rate from App Store search by 10%. That's
Nice.
a really powerful feature, and that's kind of where I always wanted to be with the app. It took a hell of a lot of development to get there.
Nice, man. What was the hardest part about building that feature?
Just all the moving parts. I mean, the data that comes from Google Analytics is pretty dirty in a way, in that you have to match up different reports into a single report. So that consolidation was pretty tricky, and I had
Mm.
to do a lot of tuning to make sure that the data was accurate there. Like any JavaScript tracker, it's not completely bulletproof. So a lot of kind of data consolidation and cleansing was pretty tricky.
Hmm.
And then a lot on the UX side as well, to get the UX right, to make it easy for people to understand what they're looking at and to understand the data, because you're presenting a lot of information there, and I think tools like Google Analytics overwhelm users. So I've seen a real strong case for um, making a simpler, more focused way to look at your analytics data just for app developers.
Totally. Yeah. That's one of the things I've thought about so many times is like, people get lost in Google Analytics. It's such a complex product, and if you can like carve out specific use cases, to drill into like the KPIs that really matter, that seems like there's so many ways to do business models around that.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's the odd developer comes by and says, "How is this different to Google Analytics?" And I just say to them, "Try both products out and tell me what you think," because I think App Store Analytics is built for that specific use case, and it just is so quick to get answers from it. Whereas if you were to go to Google Analytics and try to get those same answers, it would take longer, and it doesn't follow your same mental patterns. So it's that kind of mental burden of using Google Analytics for App Store optimization that is one of the key benefits I see with the tool, is that you can go, as we were talking about earlier on, you can go really deep on that problem area, and you can come up with a hyper-focused solution just to that that issue and that use case of people wanting to grow their app listing traffic.
Right, right. And like other than like aside from making things sort of easier and more actionable, is there data that you just can't get in Google Analytics by itself? Like I think I saw you mention something related to certain query string parameters that just aren't going to show up in Google Analytics or something like that.
Yeah, the query string stuff is very difficult to get in Google Analytics. I wrote a blog post about being able to dump that data out into Google Sheets, and you can do it that way. So there's nothing like proprietary in what, like the data that's going into App Store Analytics. An area that I'm looking at though is to have a really detailed history of your App Store performance as well, and to bring that and marry the two data sources together, and that wouldn't be something that you would see in Google Analytics.
Right, right. So like for an app developer, do you give recommendations on like things to try or in the app, or if not, like what are some things that you think? I mean, you mentioned the idea of branded keywords versus our organic type keywords, but what are some things that if an app developer is watching that they might want to try out?
Yeah, I mean, recommendations is something I want to do in the app. I think it'd be really cool to have a. I don't want to give away too much of my roadmap here, but I think I've always been quite frustrated with like Shopify's app listing editor. It's okay, I guess it's just a bunch of white boxes, so it doesn't really guide you. I think it'd be interesting to guide app developers on how they write good copy for their app listing, and examples of what might perform well for them specifically. So I mean that's an area I definitely want to look at. But to speak to your question, I think each app's data hides a lot of gems in it. That's certainly what I've found from my own apps and from helping app developers over the last year or so, is like dig into your own data and try and understand it. The example that I used of my own app at the time of like how we were ranking for brand keywords that we didn't really want to, and we found also some terms that people were using in a form that we didn't expect them to be using them. So spelt in a different way, or with words that we wouldn't have associated with it. In the structured data area, there are kind of so many ways of saying the same thing, really. What we found was people were actually searching for a term that we didn't think they'd be searching for. I think what my tool does is it guides people to where the answer might be for them, and it doesn't kind of enforce my own idea of what the answer might be at the moment. And it's an interesting area that I've thought of, is like, how far do you go down that guidance route? Do you want to be a completely generic tool like Google Analytics but focused on App Store optimization, or do you want to come out with like a checklist of of what app
Mm,
developers can do. So it's something I talk to a lot about developers all the time, and I think
mm.
it's interesting to hear different opinions there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like sort of whether to be kind of more generic or more opinionated with the solution. Um, and
Definitely.
do you if somebody signs up, do you at all like look at their help walk them through like if I say, hey, what do you think of my data, or give like tell me what you think, give me some ideas. Is that something you do, or are you more like, hey, I'm building the tool, it's like self-serve kind of a thing, or do you have a pricing tier where people could pay a little more to get like your brain like more directly involved in kind of helping them to grow?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm at the stage where um, I want to learn a lot about app developers and what they want from the product. So at the moment,
Mm,
I'm quite hands on. If an app developer reaches out and has specific questions, I'll spend a lot of time helping them out. But also that helps me because then I can understand like what are your jobs to be done. Why are you asking these questions, and what are you hoping to achieve from it.
mm,
Um, I found from my failed product, I found it's really quite hard to get that advice component correct.
mm,
It's it's sometimes better just to lead people to answers rather than try and give them the answer. But
mm-hmm.
it's something I'm thinking of. I think how I might approach it is on the education side to so create a lot of content on what I've learned and the experiments that I've ran. Um,
Right,
Look at case studies from other app developers and what they've done, and then app developers can reach their own conclusions on it.
right.
So yeah, at the moment, there isn't that element of like this is what you need to do.
Yeah,
But I'm not sure whether that should be a product feature or it should be educational or it should be even like a consultancy productized
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
It'd be interesting to see where that lands up because it's something people want.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, everybody loves like, to see the key takeaways. Like, I
Yeah.
changed this and I got this result, or I tweaked, the thing you said about the benefit images, or, looking for certain keywords. Like, I think people would be drawn to that. It's the kind of thing, if I'm an app developer and I can just keep an eye on this sort of feed of ideas and recommendations and that use those to inform my own decisions, I think that'd be interesting. Um,
It would. I mean, the difficulty there is, again, what I found is that the App Store is broad and the merchant use cases are broad. So a recommendation for an app developer who wants to optimize for plus stores, for example, might not apply to someone who's looking to just attract lots and lots of drop shippers. Um, so it's a hard problem. I think yeah, there's no magic bullet. I think it's all about these experiments and learning and building up your own learning. So I think the product's successful if it can help app developers to learn about what works best for them,
mhm.
um, and seed some ideas. Definitely seed some ideas, but not say with 100% certainty that you're going to take these actions and they're going to improve your traffic or installs. Rather, this is
Yeah,
something you might think about and think about your own use case and think about your own branding and how that
yeah,
works. And I'm going to
yeah.
give you the tool to accurately measure and understand what happened after you did those things.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned like plus stores. It seems like there's a bit of a divide between like the higher tier apps that are, decent sized companies, and they're doing all, they've got their own sales and marketing teams and stuff like that. And, a lot of it seems like a good number of plus stores like don't use the app store directly a lot of the time to find stuff. And maybe that was because like a lot of those apps tended to be private in the past, and now they're starting to require them all to be public. So maybe that'll change. But there's kind of it almost seems like there's this divide between like the higher tier apps and then kind of the rest of the. Do you see that? Like, do you see that like those different use cases?
Um, Yeah, I think there are definitely apps that split into a specific segment of merchants. I mean, I think there are also apps that do a great job of straddling both as well. Um, I think as we've chatted about, I think an interesting area is the discovery process for Plus merchants.
Yeah.
Um, it's certainly not a case that they're gonna land on the public app store and they're gonna read a few reviews and they're gonna install an app in their live multi-million dollar store,
Right.
because super risky, and they know it, and they have different needs. So I think that's an interesting area for sure.
Yeah. 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 That is an interesting. I'm a little more familiar, I guess, with coming from the Magento world, that kind of mid-market side of things. So I've been thinking about that, and talking to a few different Plus merchants about this kind of thing. What are some interesting apps out there that you think are um, maybe not as well known, or that are well known, but you think you really like, that you think merchants get a lot of value out of? I know I'm
Ah, that's
asking
a
this
good
kind of
question.
on the fly. Yeah,
I'm not sure I want to mention too many because we have a lot of app users on App Store Analytics. I don't want to step on any of their toes.
fair
Um,
enough. Fair enough.
there's a lot of there are a lot of good quality apps out there for sure. I hear app developers complain that there's a lot of low quality on the App Store, and there is. I think the harder problem now though is surfacing these newer high quality apps.
Right.
Um, that's really hard. You definitely need to have some kind of marketing chops to launch an app nowadays on
Right.
Shopify. So there are
Right.
a lot of good stuff that goes under the radar, and a lot
Right.
of let's call it maybe not as good stuff that does well just because they can add that pizzazz to acquisition.
Right. Right. Yeah, I was listening to the Practical E-commerce podcast with Eric Banholz, and he was talking about their stack at Beard Brand and the different apps that they use, and they mentioned this one that they talked about the different apps they were using. They're like, yeah, this one's good, this one's good, da, da. And then he's like, this one app we just started using is called Grapevine, and it does post-purchase questionnaires or surveys. So you can ask a question, where do they come from, whatever. And he's like, this app is amazing, and they're a Plus merchant, but it's like a $3 a month app. And by far, like, of everything he talked about in the episode, that was the one he was most excited about, because it just worked and it was easy to install, and it gave them really useful information. So um, my
It's
ears
true.
kind of perked up when I heard that one. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point because, as you probably know, there's the Shopify Plus certified app program, which is pay to play, and it's $15,000 a year. So that's going to be something that puts off a lot of $3 apps. And yeah,
Yeah.
I understand. I understand why it exists, and I think it does. It is a good way of solving this Plus app discovery problem, um, because it has all kinds of stuff around your support SLAs, your uptime, your response, um, data security, all this kind of stuff that like a Plus merchant arguably needs. So all of that vetting's done for apps, but at the same time, I kind of worry a little bit that it's going to become too elitist and it's going to become too enterprisey. If you've got a
Hmm.
massive price tag like that on it, the good thing with the 20% that Shopify takes is that it's performance based, isn't it? It's taking the value metric, and it's taking a cut of that. With the certified app program, it's a big wall, it's a big barrier for those $3 apps that might be just as good as this other one that costs $400 a month.
Right. Right. How should a if I'm a Plus merchant and I'm thinking about evaluating an app, and like you're saying, like, I want to be more mindful of data security, things like that. How should they go about evaluating A lot of times it's like you said, the pizzazz, it's the sizzle it's the how much marketing hype is there around an app, right? That's one way that things happen. But how should they evaluate if they're looking at an app? How should they, determine if it's a good fit for them if they just land on an app store listing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the misstep, isn't it? I think landing on the App Store listing. I think you can use your own network to discover opportunities probably better than blindly searching the App Store. And
Right.
I don't want to downplay the App Store, but I think as we've said, Plus merchants do have a different set of needs, um, and I do think the best way for them is to go through, either the Plus certified app program to find these apps, or more often than not through their own Shopify partner who's helping them out with building the store and maintaining it.
Right.
I mean, and then you've got other stuff that's going on as well. I mean, there are a lot of podcasts in this space, as you've said, that mention apps that help merchants out, which I think is great. I think those kind of sources, if I was a Plus merchant, I would lean toward. You can waste a lot of time on the App Store as well with trying to find something that's a good fit for you. It's a personal
Right.
recommendation is really good, for sure.
Right. Right. Well, it's funny you mentioned the podcast thing. That's one of the things I've often thought about is like a recommendation algorithm that's driven by podcast mentions. Um, because there's such like a high signal to noise ratio a lot of times in podcast mentions, like for whatever reason, I don't know. And like if you could pull out that data like in a structured way and like find mentions across, whatever number of podcasts in the space, that'd be an interesting idea.
That would be super cool. Probably pretty easy to make as well, if it's because most of them put their transcripts up, don't they? So you could
Right.
scan
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
nice.
Well, let me know if you're looking for a little side project at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
What communities, if any, are you plugged into, for people that are building, building Shopify apps?
I think the one I enjoy quite a lot is the Facebook, what's it called, Shopify app developers. I think it's run by Sam Henning, and I think he's had it for quite a while now. He's also
Okay.
written a Sassy, which is like a tool for checking your rankings in the App Store.
Oh, cool.
He's behind the Facebook group. It's very good. It's active with a lot of really interesting questions, and a lot of people sharing their own experiences and stuff in there as well.
Cool.
I don't know. I have very limited knowledge of the Magento world. I think I've kind of when I have touched on it when I've been working for online retailers and stuff, it's left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, to be honest. I
Hot
think
mess.
Shopify. Yeah, I don't know. I think like people seem. I like Shopify people better than Magento people, if you can say that.
No, I understand. Yeah, I think there's almost a more entrepreneurial um, vibe, I think, in the Shopify ecosystem. Like it's funny because Commerce Hero is like a hiring platform, so people will hire developers and Magento developer. And then I've been starting to get into like Shopify stuff too. And so I was looking for somebody was looking for a back-end developer that knew like the Shopify API as well. And if you're looking for a back-end Magento developer, you could find you could find a good number of them that are looking for a full-time job or freelance or whatever. And a buddy of mine my buddy of mine goes, all the developers that know the Shopify API are building their own apps. And it kind of something clicked for me there. Like if you take your average developer in the Shopify world, they're probably more entrepreneurial. And maybe that speaks to, Shopify building out a better platform ecosystem for app development. But anyway, that was something that I had kind of noticed.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think kind of feeds into my thought as a software engineer when I was like a paid employee. I kind of realized, okay, I'm doing myself short here. At least become like a contractor and start to treat yourself as a
Right.
business.
Right.
Because you've got some very valuable skills there, like market
Right.
them and be entrepreneurial. Some people do want the
Right.
paycheck every month, and that's great. That's their path.
Right.
But I think
Right.
yeah, Shopify ignites that spark in a lot of people that other
Yeah.
platforms and ecosystems doesn't tend to.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way of putting it. That's a great way of putting it. Um, well, last question, and then I got to wrap up here in a minute or two. Any like, and we sort of touched on this, I think, a little bit, but like any opportunities that you see in the app ecosystem um, right now, as far as like types of apps, categories of apps that you think, there's a good opportunity to build something out there.
Wow, I mean that's another hour question. I think that one. So many opportunities out
Yeah.
there. So many opportunities out there. Um, I think you have to think about what your strengths are definitely, and then play to that. For example, if you're very good at engineering, and by that I mean like good, like you can build scalable systems, and you've dealt with some like high volume platforms. I think there are some apps in the App Store who have a virtual monopoly, just because they've got a really tough technical moat around them. Um, I think there's an opportunity if you do have those technical chops to like not get sucked into the whole copycat app thing, and really build something technically challenging. I think there
Mm,
is still a big opportunity there for sure.
yeah. Okay.
And
All
also,
right. Fair enough. A little vague, but I'll take it. um, it's funny.
yeah,
I was talking to somebody recently about like subscriptions, and a lot of people use recharge, and I've heard a lot of people say that there are some challenges there, but there is this huge, and like you said, there's a virtual monopoly, I would think, with recharge and bold, and but there's this gigantic technical moat of building your own checkout
yeah,
that is really, and I've heard that there's sometimes some issues with downtime and stuff like that with recharge, but it's I mean they're a huge company, and it's a massively difficult technical moat. And now with the new APIs that are going to enable subscriptions through the native checkout, that's going to change. Like I was thinking about that yesterday. Like that's going to change the game entirely. Like there's going to be an opportunity for people to come into that space and build all sorts of stuff without that that level of complexity in place, and being able to rely on the Shopify checkout, which is huge.
yeah. I think that's in these years I've been on Shopify. I think I can see the engineering pace at the moment is faster than it has been with stuff like the checkout coming out, and yeah, multilingual and all this kind of stuff. So I think if you are good and you can take advantage of these platform developments, you can be a first mover, and you can benefit from the halo effect of being one of the first apps in that category, because you'll get pushed by Shopify on their
Right.
channels when they say we've got this new thing for merchants out there. You can also use these apps. I
Right.
think that's great if you can leverage those new opportunities as they come out.
Right. Right. Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much. It's great to get a chance to chat. What's the best place for people to find you online?
You can find me on Twitter. It's drsim. That's where I hang out most these days, and you also found me around the Facebook group and the Slack channels as well.